For 8 months I shared a desk with a man I never once met, and by the time I understood he'd been using those hours to learn my life, he was parked down at the dead end of my street with his lights off, watching my house. I'm Weston. 35, I dispatch for a freight company outside Nashville, and the way our office works, or worked, is that the desks run around the clock. I had the day board. Somebody else had the overnight. Same chair, same monitor, same drawers, just 12 hours apart, and I never laid eyes on the guy because our shifts never touched. His name was on the schedule and that was it. For most of a year he was less real to me than a coworker 3 cities over, just a name and a warm chair when I sat down in the morning. The thing is, when you share a desk with someone you never see, you get to know them anyway, in a low background way. He rounded my pens up into the cup. He'd finished the coffee and start a new pot, so it was fresh for me, which I thought was nice. Little courtesies across a shift change. I started leaving him a sticky note now and then, thanks for the coffee, and he'd leave one back, and honestly for a while it was the friendliest work relationship I had, a pen pal I shared a chair with. Then the notes changed, slow, in a way I only saw looking back. They got personal. First it was just, hope the Titans pull it together, because I had a mug. Fine. Then, saw you left early Tuesday, hope everything's okay, and I hadn't told anyone I ducked out early that Tuesday, but the badge logs are right there, I figured he checked the logs. Then one that said, your daughter's got your smile, and I sat with that one a long time, because there was no work reason for him to know I have a daughter, and the only photo of her was one I kept face down in my drawer. My locked drawer. Or the drawer I thought locked. There'd been a thing before the notes I'd shrugged off. My chair. I'm particular about the height, bad back, and some mornings I'd sit down and it was dropped all the way to the floor, like a much bigger man had been in it. I'd crank it back up and think nothing of it, a guy adjusts a chair. But he was tall, I know that now from the footage, and every single morning I'd been resetting my own seat back up from the shape of a man I had never met, smoothing out the dent he left in my day before I'd even had my coffee. I want to be fair, I told myself a dozen normal stories. He found the photo, nosy but harmless. He heard about my kid from someone. People talk. But the drawer thing kept snagging, because I did lock it, I'm sure I locked it, and a locked drawer that someone's been in is a different animal than a nosy guy, and I started, without quite admitting why, keeping better track of my own desk. Marking where things sat. And things moved. Every morning, small things, moved and put back a little wrong, my stapler square to the edge, the photo face up when I'd set it face down, a man going through my station every night with all the time in the world and no one to see him do it. What made me pull the office footage was the key. I kept a spare house key in the back of that drawer, taped to the underside of a little tray, because I'd locked myself out one too many times and the office felt safe. And one morning the tape was there and the key was gone, and 2 days later it was back, in the wrong spot, stuck down with a fresh piece of tape that wasn't my tape. He'd taken my house key overnight and brought it back, and there is exactly one reason a man does that, and it isn't to make a pot of coffee. And then he was outside my house. I almost didn't clock it, a sedan at the dead end of my street a couple evenings, parked facing my place, and one night I walked down for the mail and it was still there in the dark with a shape in the driver's seat, and when my porch light caught it the car pulled out slow, unhurried, the way you leave a spot you've decided you're allowed to be in. I didn't get a plate. I had a feeling and a warm chair and a house key that had spent a night somewhere it shouldn't, and I finally understood that the man I shared a desk with had been the closest thing to my life for 8 months and I would not know his face if he sat down beside me. I went to my manager and we pulled the overnight camera, and I watched this man I'd never met sit in my chair at 3 in the morning and go through my desk like it was his job. Not fast. Not nervous. He had a routine. He'd open the drawer, take out the photo, look at it, set it up against the monitor, and just work with my daughter's face propped in front of him for a while. He photographed my paperwork. He held my key up to the light. And near the end of the clip, he did the thing that put me on a plane of fear I'd never been on. He leaned into the desk phone and he pulled up my personnel file on the shared terminal, my address, my emergency contacts, my kid's name, and he took a picture of the screen with his phone, slow, careful, like a man saving something for later. The police got involved because a photographed personnel file and a copied house key are things you can hold, and I'll give the law one sentence: what he'd been doing on those overnight shifts was enough to arrest him, and I let them carry it from there. My manager went quiet watching that footage with me, and then he told me the overnight guy had asked him, twice, real casual, whether the day dispatcher ever came in on weekends, and my manager had just answered, "Because why wouldn't you? It's a coworker asking about a schedule." That's the part that eats me. Everybody helped him. Every person he asked handed over a piece of me without a second thought, my hours, my weekends, my kid's name once at a holiday thing, because he wore the badge and stood in the break room and looked exactly like a guy you tell things to. He didn't stalk people he saw. He stalked the people whose lives he sat inside of while they were home asleep, the warm chair, the locked drawer, the face-down photo, a whole person you never have to meet to own. They asked if I wanted to see the rest of the footage, the other nights, and I said no. I'd watched the one where he propped my daughter's photo against the monitor and sat with it, and I did not need to know how many other nights he'd done it, because the answer was going to be all of them, and some numbers you can't put back in the box once someone says them out loud. I told them to keep the tapes and never tell me the count. I changed my locks with the key he'd copied still in evidence. I took my daughter's photo out of that building and I asked for a schedule where I closed the office myself, alone, because now I'd rather be the last one out than hand the room to someone I never see. And what stays with me isn't a face, because I still don't really have his, it's the pot of coffee. 8 months of a stranger being kind to me across a shift change, fresh coffee, my pen's in the cup, and the whole time he was reading me off my own desk, and the kindness wasn't kindness. It was him keeping the chair warm for the version of this where he finally sat down in my life while I was in it.
So there was a woman at my office who started, harmlessly, with my haircut, and it took me almost a year to understand that she wasn't copying me, she was replacing me, and by the time I understood it, she was standing outside my building in my coat. I'm Elise, 28. I manage accounts at a mid-size firm in Denver, and the woman, I'll call her Marissa, started in my department that spring. Friendly, a little intense, sat near me. And the first thing was flattering, honestly, the way it always starts. She got my hair cut. The same cut, the same color, close enough that people mixed us up in the hall. And I was, God help me, a little pleased. Imitation, flattery, all that. I told myself I had a work friend with good taste. Then it kept going, past the point where flattery has an explanation. She bought my bag, the specific one, not a similar one, mine. She started using my phrases, my little verbal tics, the way I say sorry to be quick when I answer the phone. And hearing my own voice come out of her 3 desks over gave me a feeling I couldn't name yet. She asked, casual, where I got my glasses, and showed up in the frames. To be fair, I kept telling myself, none of this is a crime. This is a lonely person latching on, be kind. That's the story I ran, because the other story was one I didn't have the shape for yet. It got into the small private things next, the ones you don't announce. I'd change my nail color, and hers would match by Thursday. I told exactly one person, quietly, that my mom was sick, and the next morning there was a card on my desk from Marissa about it, signed with a little heart, a thing I had not told her, a thing she'd overheard and decided was hers to carry too. She started answering questions in meetings before I could, in my phrasing, like a second track of my own voice running a half beat behind mine, and people laughed and called us twins. And every time they said it, I felt a little more like the copy, and a little less certain I was the one who came first. The turn was the car. I mentioned, offhand, at lunch, that I was finally trading my old car in. And what I was getting, the make, the color, this specific blue. And 2 weeks later that exact car, that exact blue, was in the office lot, 3 spaces from mine. She'd bought my car before I'd even picked mine up. And that's when the feeling finally had a name, because you don't accidentally buy a stranger's future car. She wasn't decorating herself to be like me. She was building herself into me, piece by piece, and I had been standing still letting her collect the parts. A friend from another team pulled me aside around then, uneasy, and asked if everything was okay with me and Marissa, because she'd walked into my cubicle after hours and found Marissa there bent over my desk calendar with her phone out, thumbing through my month. And she'd had a smooth little excuse ready. My calendar. My dentist, my weekends, the trip I had booked. She was learning my days the same way she'd learned my hair, and it landed on me cold that she wasn't only dressing like me anymore. She was learning where I would be, and the distance between those two things is the whole distance between a compliment and a plan. It left the office, is the thing. That's when it stopped being weird and started being the other thing. She showed up at my gym, a gym across town I'd never mentioned, at my hour in the same class. I started seeing her at my King Soopers, the one by my apartment, not hers. I'd see her at my coffee place on Sunday, my neighborhood, 40 minutes from hers, holding my order, the exact drink, and she'd smile and lift it like a toast. I started seeing my own life happening next to me, one seat over, and I want to describe what that does to you, because it isn't the fear of being hurt. It's something worse and harder to explain. It's the fear of being erased. Of looking up one day and finding there are 2 of you, and the room has stopped being sure which one is the original. The night it broke, I came home late, and there was a woman sitting on the steps of my building in the dark, and for one horrible second I thought I was looking at a photograph of myself, my coat, my hair, my bag on her shoulder, my posture. And then Marissa stood up and smiled and said she'd been waiting, that she wanted to see where I lived because she felt like she already knew, and she said it warm, like a gift, and I have never been so frightened by a friendly sentence, before or since. She knew my building. She'd dressed as me to come to it. And she said, still smiling, that we should just tell people we're sisters, it's easier. And the way she said easier made the back of my neck go cold, because easier than what? I didn't let her up. I stood on the sidewalk in the cold with my keys threaded through my fingers and told her I was tired and she should head home. And she tilted her head, my head, that exact tired and patient little tilt of mine that I had to watch her do back at me. And she said she didn't mind waiting, that she was good at it. She sat back down on my step in my coat, like she lived there, and meant to be found there. I walked to a lit diner 2 blocks over, and I did not go home until I watched, from the corner, hours later, her finally stand up and leave, unhurried, taking one long look up at my windows first, sorting out which ones were mine. I did everything you can do, which with her was almost nothing, because she never threatened me, never touched me. Every single thing she did was something a person is allowed to do. Buy a coat. Get a haircut. Sit on a public step. The police were kind and useless. There's no law against becoming someone. HR moved her to another floor, and she thanked them warmly, because the new floor put her 1 row from where my mentor parked, and I understood a floor was never going to be the thing that stopped this. I transferred to our other office, and then I quit the company altogether. And I changed the haircut I'd had for 10 years because I couldn't look in a mirror without checking whether it was me. Months after I walked away, a package showed up at my new apartment. No return address, and inside was a coat. My coat, the exact style I'd stopped wearing, brand new, in my size, and a note in careful handwriting that just said, "In case you miss it." She'd found my new address. She wanted me to know she still had the pattern of me even after I'd run, that I could change my hair, and my job, and my whole city, and she'd already learned me well enough to follow. And that the version of me she'd built didn't need the original anymore to keep on going. I got cameras for the new place and a lock the building didn't have a copy of, and I still, 2 years on, catch myself scanning a room full of strangers for my own coat, my own hair, the back of my own head across a crowd. Because she taught me the most unsettling thing in the world isn't a face that wants to hurt you. It's your own face, worn by a stranger, lifting your coffee across a room, smiling like it finally fits. What stays with me is the toast. The little lift of my coffee across the room, my drink in her hand, that pleased private smile. Because she was never angry at me, and she never wanted to hurt me, and somehow that's worse. She just wanted to be me so completely that there wouldn't be room for two. And the scariest people aren't always the ones who want you gone. Sometimes it's the one who wants your life so badly she's willing to wait, right behind you, in your coat, for you to step out of it.
The morning after I finally went to HR about him, I woke up at 3 a.m. to every light in my house burning and my work badge, the one that lived on a lanyard around my neck, sitting in the middle of my kitchen table, and I had worn it home the night before. Let me back up. I'm Dominic, 39. I run operations for a distribution center in Houston, and the man was a supervisor named Colin who'd started reporting to me that winter. It didn't read as dangerous at first. It read as a guy who wanted to be my friend a little too hard. He mirrored my schedule, clocked in when I did, took his lunches when I took mine. He learned my order at the taco truck and started having it waiting. Intense, sure, but I've managed intense guys before, and I figured it would settle. It did not settle. It aimed. The thing is, he had access, and I didn't think about what that meant until it was a problem. He ran a badge system as part of his job. He could see who entered what door and when, the whole building, all hours, and I found out later he'd been pulling my access logs for months, building a map of my days down to the minute, when I got in, when I clocked out, which nights I worked late alone. He knew my patterns better than I did because he was studying them on a screen while I was just living them. I found out how deep it ran when IT pulled his history afterward. He hadn't just glanced at my logs. He'd built a spreadsheet, my badge ins and badge outs going back to the day he started under me, color-coded, the late nights flagged, one tab for the door I used, another for the nights the lot was empty when I walked out. A study of me. A document. The kind of thing you build when you're planning to be somewhere a person is going to be, alone, and you just haven't picked the night yet. And when I started pulling back, canceling the little friend stuff, he didn't get the hint. He got precise. It moved to my house without ever asking permission to. A food delivery I didn't order showed up, my order, to my address, which was not in any system he should have had. My wife mentioned a truck that idled across the street some evenings. My garage light, the motion one, started tripping at odd hours with nothing on the security feed because it faced the door and not the side yard. And I want to be honest that I explained every one of these away for weeks, because the alternative was that a man from my work had walked off the property and into my life, and you don't want to be the guy who's paranoid about a coworker. My wife saw him first as a person and not a feeling. She was up with the baby one night and said there was a man across the street just looking at the house, hands in his pockets, not doing anything, and when she moved the curtain he lifted a hand and waved at her, friendly, and walked off. She couldn't say why a wave scared her worse than if he'd run. I knew why. I'd been getting that same wave in the parking lot for months. It's the wave of a man telling you he's comfortable, that he isn't worried, that he has all the time he needs. What I couldn't explain away was HR. I finally went, laid it out, the logs, the deliveries, the truck, and they were decent about it, and they told him to have no contact, and they cut his access that afternoon. And the very next morning, 3 a.m., every light in my house was on. He'd been inside. While my family slept, the day after I reported him, he'd come into my home and turned on every light in every room, top to bottom, and left my own badge on my kitchen table, the badge that was around my neck when I fell asleep, which meant he'd been close enough to me in the dark to take it, and he'd wanted me to know that no cut access card was going to keep him out, because the building was never the thing he had a key to. I was. Here's the frame I'll see forever. I came down the stairs into my own bright kitchen at 3 in the morning, and there was my badge, squared in the middle of the table under the light, my face on it looking up at me, and next to it a fresh cup of coffee, still warm, made in my kitchen, in my pot, waiting for me. He'd made me coffee in my own house in the middle of the night and left it steaming so I'd know exactly how recently he'd been standing where I was standing. I have never in my life been so afraid of a warm cup of coffee. We didn't sleep in that house again. We checked into a hotel that same morning, kids and a garbage bag, and I sat on the end of a hotel bed at dawn and finally understood what the badge was for. He could have taken anything that night. He could have done anything, standing over my sleeping family in the dark. And what he chose to do was make coffee and set my own face on the table, because hurting us was never the point. The point was to show me he could, any night he decided to, and to hand me that to carry to bed for the rest of my life. That's a worse thing to leave than a wound. A wound closes. The coffee is still warm every time I shut my eyes. My daughter had woken up and come to the top of the stairs that night and seen the lights and the man's coffee before we got her back down, and for weeks after she asked me who made it, and I never once had an answer that let her sleep, and neither did I. The night it turned was the night we didn't wait for the police to be enough. He came back, and this time the alarm I'd finally installed went off, and he came through the side gate and I met him in my own backyard, and there was a bad minute in the dark that ended with me needing 4 stitches in my hand and him face down on my patio until the cruiser came. And I'll give the law its one sentence: he was arrested and booked, and that's the part they don't put in the safety training, because it doesn't end when you quit. It doesn't end when they cut the badge. It ends when he decides, or when somebody stops him in a backyard. He made bail before I'd even finished the drywall on the gate he'd come through, and that's the sentence that actually matters, not the arrest, the bail. Because a protective order is a piece of paper, and he'd already shown me exactly what he thought of paper the night they cut his badge access, and he walked into my kitchen anyway and made himself at home. So we didn't stay to find out what he thought of the order. We moved. New town, new job, and I don't share my schedule with anyone at work anymore, not even the friendly ones, especially not the friendly ones, because I learned the hard way that the person memorizing your patterns doesn't look like a threat. He looks like the guy who has your coffee ready. What stays with me is that badge on the table, my own face under my own kitchen light, and the message it didn't need words to send. You think a locked door is what keeps him out. But he sat across from you for a year. He already knows the door isn't the way in. The way in is that you never once looked at the friendly guy who clocked in when you did and thought to be afraid.